Here are 4 ways to elevate any pant, trousers or shorts, and you don't even have to put them in the planning stage. You can have them already made up, that is your pants, and add these additions and it will elevate it instantly as well as being practical. You could even get creative and do different colours. Let's go. Back pockets are nice and easy. All you're going to need is a bit of tracing paper, your favourite pair of jeans or pants, and trace around the pocket at the back. That gives you the shape. Now, you'll also have to, when you cut it out, add a few things. So you're going to add around the perimeter a little bit of extra material so you can fold under the top. There's quite a bit. It's going to be folded down so it's like a facing. Just like that. So add enough for your facing at the top, and around the edges add enough to turn under. Let's finish the top pocket edge first so nothing frays. You have 2 to do. Then we go to our sewing machine and we simply do a nice straight stitch to keep that facing down, and it's also going to form a nice line on the front of the pocket. There we go. Both of them done. Now we'll finish all the other edges because we don't want anything to fray. Zigzag if you're on a sewing machine, otherwise overlocker does a good job too. And this also gives us a nice guideline for our turn under. That's what it looks like at this stage. Let's pop it under an iron. We're going to trim off any extra tails that you have with the overlocker, and we're going to turn under all of the edges, tuck in the remaining chain so it will get caught, and give it a good press. Pressing helps you because there's less fiddle and it'll be an easier sewing job. So get round all your sides. We're keeping the turn under very small, and that helps keep your corners very neat. Press all the way around, keeping your chains tucked in. It now looks like this, and we're going to sew around the edges. First of all, I'm going to sew the top edge of my pocket opening because I want to have that double line because I've used that elsewhere in my shorts. It's a little decorative. Now I'm going to make sure my chains are nicely tucked under those pressed edges, and I'm going to go and sew all the way around the tucked under edges. When you get to a corner, it's needle down, foot up, and pivot the material. Foot down, keep sewing. That's all there is to the corners. And we're doing this so that our sewing of our pockets onto our shorts is a lot easier. We're doing our best to keep our chains tucked in, our corners crisp, and the line that we're sewing very, very straight. Backstitch to finish, and then give it a good press because that will make your corners crisp. And this is our pocket so far. We're ready to now go on and pin it to your shorts. So when you've got it positioned on your shorts, give it a check. You want to check that the distances are all equidistant. Equidistant to the waist line, waist join line, equidistant to the back seam at various points of your pockets. And now we'll go and sew around the edges. So on your sewing machine, we're going to make a very straight line, keeping very close to the edge of your pocket. Not wandering off the edge of the pocket, of course, but a nice straight line. And we're going to do the same things as we always do when we get to corners. Needle down, foot up, pivot, foot down, and keep going. We're keeping that line as consistently straight as we possibly can. Now in our next section where we're going to be talking about front patch pockets, I'll also give you some really good guidance tips about how to keep that line super straight. And of course I should also take the time while we're getting around these pockets to say, do subscribe. We'd love to have you with us. All right, we're almost there. Last corner, last side to do. I'm going to jump just to the finishing edge. So we are now finishing that stitch backstitch to finish and secure your thread. Try not to go over the edge. And this is what we're looking like. The pocket is now attached. When we wear it, it's going to look like this. Hands able to get in and quite flattering. Moving right along to front patch pockets. And we'll take this one at a gentler speed. We're going to grab our pattern and a bit of tracing paper, put that over the top, and then all we're doing is sketching out a shape that would make a front patch pocket, which is basically a rectangle. So that's all I'm doing, making sure it fits my pattern. If you're doing this directly onto pre-made pants, then you're going to have to just put that on your flat pants. That's fine. Now, we will true things up, make sure things are straight, and give it a rough cut out. So here we go, just giving that a bit of a true up. It's cut out. You can see I've got a slanted opening for my hand to slide in. And now I'm going to put that onto the pant and really check that it's going to work. I'm also going to go and try this on in a minute. But first of all, I'm just going to mark in exactly where that waist join is. And I'm going to make sure that it is not too long. I haven't hemmed these pants yet, so I have to make sure that I've got myself room for a hem. And then I can cut out the little adjustments I've made and use some sticky tape to stick it on. And then I'll go away and in front of the mirror, I'm going to see what this looks like. Because I always really like to see my designs. It's hard when it's flat to see if it's really going to suit you or whether you need to make it, that vertical join. Move it over a bit because these vertical lines can be really slimming if they're put in the right place. So we're going to go away and check all of that in front of the mirror using sticky tape. Also, I needed to just add a little bit there, so I put the note. Okay, I've come back from the mirror. Take this off, and if you're happy with the shape, great. If you're not, you just make the alterations that you need to do. Now, in my case, I needed to make my pocket opening a bit bigger because I practiced putting my hands in there, and I thought, no, I really need a little larger opening to get my hands easily through into the pocket. So we can do that too to keep these exceptionally functional. Who wants pockets that don't function well? There's my completed pocket. All right, now please be aware that if you do any ironing on a self-healing cutting mat, that it will warp it. So a bit of a case of don't do what I'm doing, what I'm telling you to do. Do your ironing of your pieces of fabric on your ironing board, but it is important you do iron them out because we're going to need everything quite exact. Here we're cutting it and I'm going, how much seam allowance do I need? I need enough seam allowance to turn that edge under and be able to do 2 rows of stitching. At this juncture, I need enough to catch it in my waist join line. So that's going to be a bit taller because I really want to add stuff. It doesn't matter if it's too high. It's going to get caught. Now that pocket is going to have a facing, so I need enough seam allowance to do just a single seam. So back to a fairly skinny seam allowance. And now for the next 2 bits, it's the same as the first vertical cut that I made. It's enough to turn under and do 2 lines of stitching. So there we have it. That's my pocket. And we have to flip it over because we don't want 2 right pockets. We want a left pocket and a right pocket. So again, remember to flip it or flip your material. Just check you've got a left and a right. And now I don't have to think about my seam allowance because I'm actually using the material I've already cut, and I can cut it exactly where the same cut lines are on my first pocket. So cut that out. Zoom, 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 around we go. And we now have 2 pockets, but we don't have facings yet. So I've got myself another scrap of material. This is a great scrap buster. You won't have much waste from cutting and making shorts if you're doing all these doodads. Lining up my pocket, I've flipped the fabric that I'm cutting, so I will get a left and a right. Oh, sorry, I've folded it. And now I'm just cutting all the way around that pocket. It doesn't have to be the same length as that pocket because this is just a facing. It does have to be the same shape and it has to be accurate. So once I've cut all of that exact pocket shape out from the top, I'm going to just fold this down to give myself a really nice straight guidance line to cut the facing piece. I'm also putting a ruler over that so I don't accidentally cut that folded pocket. Okay, this is just a line up and I can cut across and get my 2 pieces of facing. Let's have a look at what that looks like. All right, pocket 1, pocket 2, 2 bits of facing. How these work is that they will be right side visible on the inside. And why we do that is that when you put your hands in your pants, in your pockets, hands in your pant pockets, or you move and the pockets move and gape, you will never see a flash of light blue. It's always going to be the same fabric and you won't notice. Let's go ahead and sew that facing. So you can see that short bit of facing is there. I've put it right sides together. So right side there is touching the right side of my shorts or shorts pocket. And I'm going to sew directionally from the waist down to the side. And we do that on both pieces so nothing goes skewed. Directional sewing is important. If you're on the sewing machine, you'll finish your edges with zigzag and sew your seam with a straight stitch. So now we can see that we are aligned on this side and perfectly aligned on that side, and that's how we want it to be. Time to press the seam to make sure it lies really, really perfectly straight. You will need a bit of a high temperature setting if you've got a cotton fabric like I do. And then open that out and make sure that the allowance is pressed to one side and give that an open seam position press. Then you can close that up and you'll see that it is perfectly aligned. We'll press that closed. And there we go, we're almost done. I'm going to just take the time to iron out my pocket because it wasn't fully ironed. And that's what we end up with, very, very perfect facing. The next little bit is we're going to use some flies-o-fex. I don't know if I've said that right, so I'll put it in as a word. It is a double-faced iron-on glue. Comes in a sheet. So one side is a little bit shiny. You can see my glue shiny bits are kind of flaking off my paper because it's a bit old. But one side you can see the webbing of glue and the other side you'll see paper. I want to get it really close to that edge of the facing that has an unfinished edge because that will prevent fraying. Okay, and otherwise I'm just trimming it so that it's going to fit nicely. My backing came off, so I'm going to use some baking paper. And all we do is iron it. Ironing it with the heat of that activates the glue, makes it sticky, and then if you've used a sheet of baking paper like I have, you can just pull that off. If you've used the actual backing, then you just peel that off. And take some time to clean up all the little threads because we're going to iron that now closed. It will glue closed, so you don't want little bits and bobs mucking up your perfection of this flat closed facing. Give it an iron. You really do need to get some heat going through this to activate the glue, particularly on that line, because that's the bit that hasn't been finished, as in an edge. We don't want it to fray. So give it a check. Make sure that it is fully closed, ironed, glued shut. That edge will be okay. And there we have it. That's your pocket facing done. And you just have to go off and do that for pocket number 2. We are looking like this. This is the underneath part of our pocket and the outside part of our pocket. And we just need to top stitch along here. But first we're going to finish all of the unfinished edges. So we can do that via overlocker, or if you're on the sewing machine, you will zigzag along all of the unfinished edges. This is going to help us turn them under so we can stitch on the patch pockets neatly, and it's also going to stop the edges from fraying. So we've done all the way around. Now we should have done that one as well, because that's going to get caught into the waistband, so should really be done. Let's go and press under our finished edges. So we're going to try and keep this very, very neat, very much a straight line, and this will help us with our sewing. I'm going to just trim off my ends of my tails here and tuck them up into the pressed, tucked edge. I'm not doing anything fancy for the corner, no mitered edges or anything like that. I'm just folding it in a square shape. And because that turn up is so tiny, it keeps it neat. Now I'm doing something different here with this last one. I'm using my loop turner to push through underneath the loops of my overlocking, and I'm going to catch the tail of my chain and then pull it back through, and you might need to give it a bit of a tug to get through, but what that does is it keeps it really, really neat, and we don't have to worry about that chain, which is at a more open position. So nice and neat. Let's finish off the pressing. One last side to do, and of course you've got another pocket to do after this as well. You're going to get used to pressing seams and pressing under. All right, we are done. We're going to top stitch around the entire pocket. We're going to start at the waist. Now you can see there's all sorts of markers on your needle plate, so you can line up your line. I'm using that little bit of a groove in my presser foot to line up against my edge of my fabric, and that keeps it straight. When I come to the corner, I might need a couple of turns of the hand wheel to get my needle positioned correctly. Foot up, pivot with your needle down, foot down, and sew along. The other thing that may happen is because when we get to the corners, there's several folds of fabric there, the machine may not progress as well with that bulk. So you'll see in a second that I just lift the presser foot, and that helps to even out the material and gives it a chance to progress again. Sometimes I also just use a bit of a hand wheel to progress through that thicker part, and that's how we get through thickness without the machine having a fit on us. We're going to do that all the way around. We're almost finished now, and let's have a look at what that looks like. See how neat and straight and even the top stitching has been. So I've done a pretty good job, and that's going to help us sew the pocket onto the shorts in a far easier fashion, because we don't have to worry about anything being tucked under. It's all secured now. All right, we do need to go and do that to the second pocket, and you need to be doing directional sewing. So we're going to start from the waist down to the side seam once again, which means that you're going to have to pick a different marker to line that up. That is the same width, because the material is now on the other side. Why do we do directional sewing? It's so that nothing gets pulled out of shape. You want both pockets working the same way. Now I'm going to line up with this little groove against the edge of my material, and that's going to give me a decorative seam. I thought this would be rather a nice touch across the pocket openings. You don't have to do this, and you may decide to do 3 or 4 lines, depends how creative you want to get. So that's all I'm doing now. Of course, you need to do the second pocket in exactly the same fashion. So let's see how well that occurred. And as we can see, I've been very consistent and very straight. The next step is to pin your pockets onto your pants, trousers or shorts. I've used the side seam as my guidance line to get everything symmetrical and straight. So I've used that to line it up, and I've made sure it's very flat to the fabric. I've also made sure at the top here that there's sufficient that's going to get caught in my waistline join. I'm going to have to unpick that to get that in afterwards. Now, I've also made sure that side is right up against the side seam, and that makes everything symmetrical. Let's go sew. Okay, so I'm starting at my side seam. You could start at the waist, that's fine, but just do the same direction for both pockets. And I'm sewing down, keeping my stitch not off the edge, not on the other bit of stitching I've already done, but somewhere in the middle and as straight as I can. Needle down, foot up, pivot for the corner, same as we've always done today, and then keep on going, keeping the fabric flat and making sure that you don't have anything caught underneath as well, because you're working with a whole garment now, not just a flat piece of pocket. So we do need to be aware of anything underneath and making sure the fabric is straight. Nice, neat corner turn. And we're on the last stretch here. Just the last row of stitching. And you can see I'm starting to get that doubled row of stitching, which is a bit of a design decorative choice on my part. All right, we're almost done at the top. Make sure that no seam allowances or anything underneath is going to get in the way and get caught. And don't overshoot the join line. Backstitch to secure your thread. Okay, we are done. This is what it's looking like, at least for one pocket, and we have to go and do the other pocket and make it as same as this one. Now the very last thing to do is to catch that pocket into the join line of the waist and shorts or trousers. So you can see that I've unpicked and I've put it in there and sewn that shut. And now I need to go along and carefully do all of my finishing with overlocker against that basting stitch, or you will be doing it on sewing machine with a straight stitch and then zigzagging your raw edges. It's going to end up like this, 2 very functional pockets, easily accommodating hands and quite stylish. Let's get on to the belt. For a self fabric belt, you'll cut yourself a very long rectangle, sufficient so that you can wrap it around and tie it with a nice amount of tassel at the front. Can you get it in one piece of your fabric? Maybe. I had to make multiple joins and I had to cut a facing because I couldn't get a fold at the top. So if you're like me, just go ahead and join together all the bits that you had to join together to make the length. Sewing machine or overlocker, just finish the raw edges. Okay, you can see the length I've got there. We're now at the opening of the belt or the end of the belt. We want to finish those raw edges. And then we've got a really long sew all the way down. Good sides together. Or if you've got a fold at the top, then you've pressed the fold and you won't have to do this step. But if you've got a facing and a length of good belt fabric, you're going to have to join it together. So a very long sew down the edge. Off we go. It is a long sew. And when we've done that, well, everyone's going to have to do this even if you had the fold. Okay, we have to finish our raw edges. So there's going to be 2 sides of raw edges. Again, a really long sew. You might be doing this on sewing machine, which is a zigzag job. We end up like that. That join line in the middle might be a fold for you. And we are going to press things. So pressing the join line for me. And then everyone has to press the finished edges, okay, because those are going to be turned up and sewn together. So press those. I'm also going to press mine in the folded in half position. You should do that whether you've got a fold or a join. And I also have to press up the ends of my belt, okay, because they also will be sewn together with the turn up. And this is what we've got. Everything neatly pressed up. It can be folded in half nice and easily. And we'll now go around and sew the end and sew the length. So we are sewing the end of our belt now. It's just one less thing to hold together when we fold it closed. Now we're folding it together. We'll make it as neat as we can. We're not doing anything special with the corners. And we'll start at the fold or the join. Do your back stitch to start, of course, and do your needle down, lift up, pivot trick at the corner, clean up any edges, tuck any chains in, and then we're going into the very long length sewing of those turned under edges, trying to get a really, really straight line of stitching when we do this. And if you've been doing a lot of stitching, you might need to change your needle. So this is a very long sew all the way down. I won't bore you with it, so I'll jump ahead, or I'll just show you what it's looking like. It's as neat as we can make it. And then we have to do it for the other side, okay? If you've got a fold, you don't actually have to join anything together. But because we've only got one line of stitching, I like to make the design symmetrical. So that's why now I've got 2 lines of stitching along the length. Now for decorative purposes, I'm also going to run another bit of stitching close to the edge because I've got this doubled row of stitching in my pocket. So I'm keeping the design element there. What it's going to do is it's going to even up any whoopsie, not quite straight lines, or didn't press that properly, and so that's my join line gone a bit wonky. So that's what it does. It sort of disguises any mishaps, and this is your final product. It gives also a bit of texture to the belt because I haven't used any interfacing or anything like that. I wanted to keep it soft, but it gives a little texture to the edges, which makes it tie and handle nicely. And we are up to belt loops. Belt loops help your belt not fall down. Okay, so they're quite important. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making a very, very long string of overlocking chain, and then I'm going to fold it into my piece of fabric. I haven't even cut this. I'm going to be trimming it to a nice square straight shape with my overlocker trimmer, and keeping the overlocker thread running down that fold. So cutting straight, keeping the chain down that fold. This is a very quick way of doing straps. So you can use it for summer tops as well, or for spaghetti straps. So we'll just overlock all the way down. I've run out of fabric, but that should be okay. Chop that off. And now we get to the pulling of that string of chain. Just going to assist it to pull and turn at the top there. Once that's started to turn under, all I do is I just pull on that chain and it starts to travel through as a turned loop. And there is our nice consistent strap. So we'll be chopping that up to make belt loops. First of all though, we need to give it a press. Okay, so we're going to be giving it a press, and we're going to do a few extra little sewing bits on it too, because you can imagine if you put this through the wash, it could not be very flat after that. I'm not much of an ironer. Now I am going to finish my ends. I've chopped my little belt loops to size. I have finished my raw edges. If you're doing this on sewing machine, you will need to do this with a zigzag stitch, and then you won't have this issue of tidying up. But I'm going to be pretty careful with my sewing here and just pull through my chains with my turn looper, and then I won't have too much of an issue with them because they'll be all nice and neat and clean like this. So what we're doing now is we're going to give them a little bit of a stitch. So straight stitch, and I'm just going to run it along the very close to the edge of one side, back stitch to finish and start, of course, flip it over and do it on the other side because I want both sides to be symmetrical with this little decorative stitch. It has a function too because the belt loop won't bunch up. Once we've got that done, we position them and pin them. Now you will need to ignore my positioning of this in terms of the side seam. I actually changed that, but in terms of where it is in height, well, you need to put your garment on and decide where you want your belt to run. Then there's going to be some turn up as well. So the first thing is we just do a back and forth wherever we want it on the lower edge. Sometimes this can be caught in the waistband join line, but for me it's not in the right position, so I'm doing it like this. And then we lift it up, and you can see there's that amount of turn under, and I'm putting the same amount at the top. I'm just trying to position that there. Okay, so hold that flat and secure the top. I'm trying purposely not to stitch on an element of elastic because I don't think that will go too well. Tidy up your threads, both sides, and now we can lay flat this belt loop, oops, and just do that little row of back and forth on top of our bottom part of the belt loop. Back and forth, and of course we need to clean up stitches, obviously, but that's what it's looking like. Enough space for a belt, but otherwise hopefully not sticking out, and that is actually why I changed the positioning. You can see I've brought them in a little closer to the front because when you have them sticking out, they stick out like ears if you put them on the side seam. I didn't like that, so I've got them a little bit closer, and I think that lies a lot better. My back one is right on the back seam. And that's all there is to belt loops. We've now got a fully elevated pair of shorts. We've taken it from this basic pair and we've taken it with all the bells and whistles, pockets, front and back, belt loop, belt. And these 4 things can be done to elevate any pair of shorts or trousers. Enjoy your comfy life, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to click on my face right now to subscribe.